All right, welcome everyone who is popping into the room. We have about 1 minute to go, so hang on tight and we'll get started in just a little bit. I have to make sure that the recording is going on. I can't see the recording button. No, it's recording. Okay, it is 2 p.m. here in Finland and noon in the UK and very, very early morning for those who are joining in from the US and something in between wherever you are joining from. But welcome, warm welcome from warm Finland to today's Firstbeat webinar, A Human Story of Burnout, Key Takeaways Towards Sustainable Peak Performance. I'm Tiina Hoffman, exercise physiologist and master trainer here at Firstbeat, and shortly I'll be joined in the discussion with Julie Blinko from the Business Health Institute, who is going to be talking about her story, and we have a really interesting session ahead. So welcome to everybody. The session will last for 45 minutes. We'll take some questions in the end, so the Q&A box is open and you can write your questions there and I'll check them out at the end of the session. And we are also recording that, and you'll get the recording afterwards in our thank you email. So in case you for some reason have to leave early, no worries, you will get the recording of the whole session afterwards. Since we have quite a few brand new people online today, people who found this webinar maybe because of the content or maybe via Julie's network. So very short introduction to Firstbeat, who we are, and then a few sort of statistics or facts about the prevalence of burnout, the unfortunate prevalence of burnout in today's society, and also a couple of findings from our Firstbeat big data that go in line with the burnout prevalence. And after that, we'll switch on to a discussion with Julie. We'll hear about her road to and from burnout, the key takeaways that she's learned during that process, and also the value that data has provided her in this learning process. And we also get to hear an introduction to Julie's business, the Business Health Institute, that actually is addressing burnout and helping people perform at a high level today. So it's a really interesting story. So let's get going with that. And just shortly about Firstbeat. We are a true pioneer in this area of heart rate variability analysis and physiological measurements. We have been working in this area for over 20 years, based in Finland, but we work internationally. We have professional users in over 70 countries, and we develop technology for physiological measurements in both wellness and in sport. And over 1,000 wellness professionals, different kinds of coaches in different sectors, they use the Firstbeat Life method in their own business, and over 1,000 elite sports teams use the Firstbeat sports methods as part of their training protocols. The idea that, or the aim, the vision that we have is to provide accurate, high-quality professional solutions to help athletes and regular people optimize their performance and their health. And a couple of things about Firstbeat Life, which is the method that I work with and also that Julie works with, and we'll show some of her data a little bit later on. We start off, as always with Firstbeat, we start off with a highly accurate sensor that measures every heartbeat. This is the Bodyguard device that electrically detects every heartbeat. And from that, we analyze heart rate variability in daily life, all day and all night. So typically during sleep, during work, during the leisure time. And then the person who is wearing the device has their Firstbeat Life app on their phone. And when you are doing a measurement, you get some real-time data. And then after the measurement period, for example, 3 days, you get the result that has converted the HRV data, the heart rate variability data, into concrete insights about stress and recovery and sleep and physical activity. So obviously the idea is to go beyond sort of abstract metrics into very practical insights about real life. And then what makes this a professional solution that is used by health and wellness coaches, nutritionists, psychologists, physiotherapists, a host of different kind of professionals, is that we we've developed this admin portal where each professional who is using this method with their clients can manage their projects and their clients in this portal. They can have access to their clients' individual results. So I can provide coaching to my client who might be sitting in the US by seeing their result in my portal, and I can share that view to them. So it's truly a professional coaching platform in that way, and makes it easier for the coach to work with their clients in different locations. Also, we have a group reporting opportunity. So those coaches who are working with groups, doing different kind of projects, they can also provide anonymized summaries of the groups that they're working with. And a couple of statistics about burnout. We had a burnout webinar earlier this year. I think it was in March or April with Florian Wolf from Germany. And he shared some of these kind of statistics, and he was looking at sort of a more of a bio-psychochemical approach into burnout prevention. But the statistics that we all have seen are quite startling. About a quarter of employees worldwide are showing at least some symptoms of burnout, clearly predisposing them possibly to actually developing burnout. 1/3 of students are at risk for burnout from this Techniker Health Insurance report in 2023. The estimated cost of burnout in the UK economy is about 28 billion a year. So obviously this is a topic that it's not going away. Finnish statistics show very much the same thing. There's one study from the Finnish Occupational Healthcare Institute comparing between 2019 and 2024. The percent of people with burnout who have had a burnout diagnosis has gone up from 66% to 10%. And likewise, very similar to the McKinsey finding, 20 to 25% are showing some signs of burnout, so being at risk of developing it. The cases have doubled with young employees. This is particularly worrisome and startling, in my opinion, that those young professionals starting their careers are already starting to have burnout symptoms. And of course, a lot of sort of speculation and studies and needed more understanding about the possible role that hybrid and remote working models might have to do with this. There doesn't seem to be a real consensus yet. There are many studies that are showing that remote work, if you're working only remotely, that might make you more susceptible to burnout, especially some individuals that might really have that sense of isolation and lack of community and lack of social support, whereas other people do seem to thrive in their remote working situation. So obviously that's one or the other is not better or right or wrong, but more strenuous and more sort of highly developed models of support need to be developed for those workplaces where a lot of the working force is working remotely, because it's easier to go unnoticed there until it's too late. So just a little bit of background about that. And since chronic stress and strong stress is clearly one of the sort of biggest predisposing factors for burnout, also Firstbeat data, we have been looking at that approach. So this statistics looks at the experienced stress. So people who do a Firstbeat measurement, this sample includes 100,000 Firstbeat Life measurements between 2020 and 2024. Particularly the proportion of those who subjectively rate themselves as very stressed has doubled since 2020. So it has gone up from 7% up to 14% last year. And also the people who rate themselves as somewhat stressed has gone up from 44% to about 49%. So very significant percent of people are rating themselves also in our sort of subsample of being very, very stressed. And the physiological stress result is showing similar things. So the challenges with recovery are increasing. A larger percent of the people who are doing these measurements are having poor result on their recovery. So their physiological recovery is not sufficient, looking at the daytime and the sleep time. So they have so many stress reactions going on that their actual physiological recovery is very limited. And this is obviously a factor that's going to challenge their overall well-being and health, and possibly lead to something like burnout if the situation goes on for too long. So yeah, just for background, a little bit of kind of something for us to bite and think about when we start talking about then an actual case. And Julie was kind enough to join me in this discussion, and I think actually for a while I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can see us a little bit better as we kind of launch into a discussion. And then in a few moments we'll also look at some of the data. But Welcome, Julie, to join me on this discussion. And could you maybe start by just telling shortly who you are and kind of what's your professional path in short to where you are today?
Thank you, Tiina. Thank you for inviting me to join this webinar today. I'm Julie Blinko, and my background for 30 years was in finance. More recently, I have co-founded the Business Health Institute, and that was co-founded with my business partner on the back of us both experiencing burnout in the workplace for different reasons, which obviously we're going to talk through, Tiina. I've also, for the past 15 years, I've also been involved in the health and well-being space. So I knew a lot about well-being, yet I still burnt out.
Yeah, which happens a lot, even the people with all the right basic knowledge, but then a certain kind of personality traits leading up to that. And maybe we can actually move on to that next, that if you think back, your burnout was a while back, but when you think back to that time, that what was the sort of the general work slash life situation in the period that led up to the burnout, and what do you think in your mind, what were the factors that contributed to you actually eventually burning out?
I think it's a combination of factors. I don't think it's one particular thing. Burnout is particularly, as you know, it's a workplace. Fundamentally, it's a workplace factor. So there were factors that contributed to me burning out in the workplace, which I didn't understand at the time. Now I've got the understanding and the data. I understand what was happening to me. For the previous 2 years in my role, I was experiencing continual tiredness. I'd always been high energy, highly committed, highly motivated in my role, but I could feel that life force draining from me, if you know what I mean. I am optimistic and personality type A by nature, so I was always thinking tomorrow will be better, tomorrow will be better. So I was always reaching for that next day. If I just get this done, yet 12 months before I actually burnt out and took 3 months off, I had a week off with very similar feelings. I was exhausted. And you think a week off or a holiday is going to fix it, and that doesn't actually fix burnout. So I can see that the factors were creeping up for the 2 years previous to me actually burning out. Yet I didn't recognise that in myself, Tiina, and nobody around me would have recognised that up to the point it hit. My boss actually said to me, I had no idea what was going on with you, because I was very good at masking. I showed up every day. I loved my job. It wasn't that I hated what I was doing. I liked the people I worked with. All of those factors were good, yet I was slowly just kind of disengaging and becoming more and more exhausted. And then there was kind of one incident that just wiped me out, and I just woke up one morning and I thought, I just can't do this anymore. I was waking up for the past week, I was waking up crying, and I just couldn't get out of bed. I just didn't want to do anything, which is very unlikely. I'm quite energetic, but I was just completely floored.
Yeah, I mean, that's a story that all of us who have read burnouts, I haven't gone through any kind of burnout myself, but read a lot of stories and talked to a lot of people who have, and personally know several who have. And that's a fairly classic story, isn't it? Kind of the internal pressure that you put on yourself. I mean, the work was demanding, but yet it was yourself putting those kind of internal
Oh,
pressures on
yeah.
yourself that was at least as
There's
much.
self-imposed expectations as well, isn't there, of what you've always done, what you've always contributed. as well as the workplace factors. I always look at it back now with hindsight. It's like a soup, isn't it? There's that much going on that it's really hard to segregate exactly what the contributing factors were, which is why we've really used data within business health to kind of pick those factors out, so help leaders really understand themselves.
Yeah, and for the listeners, I can't remember if I already said it, but we don't have Firstbeat data from that time when Julie was actually going through burnout, because she only discovered Firstbeat later. So we'll be able to show some of her learnings and experiences during her later recovery processes, kind of to make sure that she doesn't burn out again. But from the time when she was actually going through that, we don't have HRV data from that time. But the experience is so classic, and also the, you know, like you mentioned, the type A personality that is highly driven, highly motivated type A personality, that is the type of personality that is the best at masking the symptoms, but also the most likely eventually then to kind of hit the wall. I think you already sort of touched upon the key symptoms that started to tell you that something wrong, but was there something else that you mentioned that you were just kind of constantly fatigued and feeling tired? Was there anything else that either yourself or somebody else noticed? That was there anybody in your life that was noticing that or getting worried about you, or was it really that you were just covering it up?
I think, yeah, I think people closest to me were concerned, but you kind of dismiss it yourself, because you just think, if I just keep going, if I just keep pushing through, things will get better. Um, and they didn't, and so it's you it's very hard to recognize within yourself, but also when I think you're on that trajectory, it's hard to listen to those people around you who care for you, because you're feeling disengaged, you're feeling more irritable than I'm not normally that irritable. um, uh, so I think you kind of I feel like myself, I blocked those closest out around me, because you don't want to hear it. You don't want to admit you're failing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a big
Yeah.
shame that comes with burnout, and people don't often talk about this, but you feel that personal sense of failure, and that's a massive part of it. And I think that's why you keep pushing through, because you don't want to fail. You don't want to let people down. You
Yeah.
don't want to let yourself down.
Yeah, that's one of the most common aspects of that, and I think that's, at least we can say that that part of it is getting a bit better, because there are a lot more open discussions about this. I mean, it's, brilliant that, I mean, the reason we actually this webinar came about when I saw your post on LinkedIn where you were telling your burnout story, and I knew you from before, from via your first, our Firstbeat partnership, but I saw your story on burnout, and it was a very frank, honest post, and that gave me the idea that this would be an interesting topic to discuss and actually have somebody share it. But also many leaders in companies, they are coming out and telling their own story, and that certainly helps that it's not such a hidden thing anymore.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, Tiina, I think once you're in kind of a leadership role, you want to be an example to others. So you want to keep going, you want to project that all is well, but I think actually being more authentic and listening to what's going on with yourself and understanding what's going on with yourself, that helps others more. But you don't see that or feel that at that particular time. Like you say, things have changed. This is 9 years ago.
Yeah,
So things are starting to change, thankfully,
yeah,
which is great, because I think the world is changing even faster now. So we need to be more aware of our well-being to thrive in a place that is in a world that's more change orientated even than it was then.
yeah. You mentioned that you eventually, then when you actually got the, when it, finally really hit you, that you had a 3 month sick leave. Was there any other sort of treatment or medical interventions, or was it the 3 month sick leave was the main thing at that point?
The 3 month sick leave, I went to the GP. I didn't know what to, obviously, to get signed off work, but you don't know really what's wrong with you. And the GP said, you're just burned out. you don't need, you know, you're not depressed. It's hard to acknowledge, isn't it, what is actually going on with yourself. Am I depressed? Am I this? Am I that? But no, I wasn't depressed. So it was really having time and space to recover. And for
Yeah.
me, a big thing about my recovery was just getting out walking, fresh air, nature. I was lucky that I knew lots of people because I've been in the wellbeing space. So I knew the people to go to. I knew what support to reach out for to help me, and that was great. But lots of people don't have that support, and that's the challenging thing, isn't it? That's the difficulty.
Yeah, yeah. Let's look at some of the data. This data that we're going to be looking at now, it actually came several years after burnout, but it's like Julie's been saying several times that it's an ongoing process, that when you have those trends and tendencies to overdo it, you have to kind of keep on top of that even years after you've actually gone through that. So we're going to be looking at some data from about 2 years ago, and then some data that is just recent from this spring. And one of the things that immediately is easy to see, that Julie's always been active. So her physical activity points, when she does measurements, exercise in some form, it has been part of her lifestyle all the time. But even still 2 years ago, the results in the area of sleep, and particularly stress recovery balance, which looks at the balance between the day and the night. So it looks at 24-hour periods. That was quite low. And see, the data really still at that point showed this kind of always on kind of mode. That's what the red color, for those who are new to the Firstbeat graphs, the red color means some kind of a stress reaction. It means that your fight or flight system is on, your sympathetic nervous system is active, and it's good and bad. It's not, it belongs to life. It's also very normal energy and activation. But if that's on all the time, that means that some kind of a stress reaction is going on in your body all the time. Your stress hormone levels are going to be high. And that very easily then prevents recovery, which is the green color. That means that the rest and digest, the parasympathetic part of the nervous system, kicks in, and your heart rate drops and your heart rate variability increases. And this graph, we looked at several results, and this was fairly representative of her situation still a couple of years ago, where pretty much high red during the day, and then some recovery, some green during the sleep, but not very consistent, not very steady, and a lot of stress reactions there as well. How would you, what were your sort of takeaways when you started to see this kind of data?
Oh, I think it really, I always think the first beat really mirrored back at me what I kind of intrinsically knew, but you don't acknowledge or admit it, because this to me is a very visual tool. You've got the complete overview of what's going on in your body, and even though your gut might tell you, this kind of verifies it. And I think, Tiina, I suspect that if I'd have had access to Firstbeat way around the time of my burnout, it would definitely have shown these results, if not worse. And I suspect that I've probably always been more in activation mode. I've probably been more in the sympathetic nervous system during the day, rather than weaving in and out of the sympathetic and parasympathetic like nature intended. I think I'm very naturally switched on. I was watching Julia Bradbury's recently. She's written a book, and she said, I'm wired for stress, and I think that's my natural disposition. So I've worked very hard over the last number of years, especially since I had insight to Firstbeat, because I thought I was doing all the right things beforehand. Like you said, I've always been very physically active, taking care of myself. But what this is really highlighted is, how do I get back into that flow? How do I get my body back into that sympathetic nervous system? Because what I love about the Firstbeat is the overall, and how it's completely interwoven into how your stress and recovery and your physical activity impacts your sleep. As you said, Tiina, my physical activity has always been good. So if you looked at that as a marker, that would have been always great anyway.
Yeah,
Yet
and that's for those who are new to the graph, the light blue color you can see here, that means some kind of physical movement. And that also tells me that it's not bad. Of course, it's good to have that. But when you are all the time either on sort of a mentally stressful state, so your red bars are high, meaning that you are highly engaged and highly pressuring yourself, and then you're moving from that to some kind of a fast walk from place to place, or maybe moving between meetings, or just being kind of in a busy lifestyle. So that it makes it very difficult for you then to even switch off when you're constantly stressing yourself either with some kind of mental demands or physical demands, which still keep the activation level high. And I think that's where we start seeing the difference when we look at the 2025 example. So this was a characteristic result from during this winter and this spring. Several days looked about like that. The physical activity point still 100, but the stress and recovery and sleep results significantly better. Especially it was nice to see the stress and recovery balance better, because now when you compare this to the previous view, you can start seeing those little green moments there during the day. And also the red is, like Julie mentioned, is weaving in and out. So it doesn't mean that you have to get rid of the stress, but it's nice when the red bars sometimes get lower, meaning that you're able to switch off a little bit better. And maybe you can tell about some of the strategies that you were finding to help facilitate this kind of a result.
I think I've become much more aware over the last couple of years. I think post COVID, because since burnout, Tiina, I've had a lot of other experiences going on that have impacted my health and well-being. So I think since COVID, I've become very much more aware of bringing items into your life that give you joy, simple things that give you joy in life, and tapping into those more instead of being in high energy. What actually gives me real relaxation and real moments. It doesn't have to be massive, but moments of joy in your life. And there can be very simple things like sat reading a book, giving yourself permission to sit and read a book for a little while. I've taken up crocheting, which was a childhood thing, and that very often puts me straight into the parasympathetic nervous system, into that green recovery state very quickly. So there's lots of other little tools that I use, strategies that are really helping me weave more of that into my life. And because of that, I've got more energy. So even though my physical activity is the same, I'm getting, as you can see from the results, better stress and recovery during my day, better quality of sleep.
Yeah, much better heart rate variability, which is this gray graph here, and the green dominated by the green throughout the sleep period. So yeah, significantly better than the previous one.
So you feel better. So you feel much more cognitively tuned in. I'm much better at decision making. I'm much more switched on. I feel calmer. I feel much more rested. So all of that is making a massive difference.
Yeah, and one of the things that you and I talked about earlier was that you also came to realize that this kind of light physical, like you can see these light blue bars, which could be like here is a walk in the evening, a walk. So the intensity is very low, heart rate doesn't get very high. The light color means that it was very easy physical activity for you, but you came to accept that that's on some days that's going to be enough. That's still going to give you good health benefits, but it's not going to add stress to your day if it's too high in intensity.
Yeah, and I can, I can walk gently in the evening, and that doesn't, my body recovers quite quickly from that,
Yeah.
and then I can sleep well. Now, I know Jackie won't mind me saying, if she walks late of an evening, it takes her body longer to recover, and that delays her sleep pattern. And that's another thing that's great about the Firstbeat is, and this is fairly obvious when I say this, Tiina, to you, but it's showing your unique patterns that work for you, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's the great thing, and that really helps when you're working with people, because I think
Having the
the
visual.
depth of my own personal understanding really helps work with
A
others.
quick comment on this parasympathetic activity, because I'm sure people have noticed that here that you're doing some kind of a parasympathetic exercise here in the evening that actually shows up a little bit like physical activity. But what was that again?
So that is that's body movement, because in a high, you know, in naturally we're living in more of a stressful environment, and we're disconnected from our bodies, and our bodies get out of balance. So I've incorporated a body movement that helps get in touch with our senses and our bodies, and help put our bodies back through more naturally that parasympathetic nervous system. And that is really working for me. That's really helped me.
Yeah, and that's interesting because you can see that while you're doing that, because it's physical heart rate, the black graph here is actually elevated. So
Yeah.
you're not going to see the recovery while you're doing that, but you said you had noticed consistently that helps you go into that
Yeah.
parasympathetic activity
Yeah, so
afterwards.
straight after I come out of it and I'm relaxing, and
Yeah.
it goes straight into the
Yeah,
into the
same thing people notice who do ice dipping, for example. So when you're in the ice cold water, probably there might be even a significant stress response, but then it boosts that parasympathetic
yes.
response right afterwards. That's great. And then we put together this one just to kind of highlight that it wasn't just those 2 days that we were looking at, that we just picked out an example from 2023 and 2025. But when Julie is really great with statistics and math, so she calculated sort of the average results from 2023 versus the average results from 2025. And it's nice to see this kind of a significant improvement, particularly in the stress and recovery balance, looking at day and night, in sleep, clear improvement. Her heart rate variability during the sleep period, that's a significant improvement. It's not easy to get that big of an improvement, but probably the burnout in the background had actually caused the HRV to be quite low for a longer time. And VO2 max even improved a little bit, even if you were actually easing off on some of your more intense exercise, but because the plan was smarter and the overall load was more balanced, so then your VO2 max as a result also improved a little bit. So really, really nice improvements. And what I think is really fascinating is that Julie, when she started experimenting with that, she was getting all these personal insights, but then let's hear a little bit about what it turned into then. What are you doing today with Business Health Institute?
When Jackie and I came
I'm gonna
together,
jump over that one and let's get into your
oh, it's okay. When Jackie and I came together, we both experienced burnout in the workplace for different reasons. What we wanted to do was actually educate business leaders how not to get burnt out, because it's unnecessary and it's painful and it takes you a long time to recover from. So, you know, I always say to people, you look after yourself when you're well, because you can always feel better, and keep you know, your performance good, and that's what you're looking towards. You want longevity, not just in your role, but you want your personal energy to be good when you're out of work. You want to enjoy life, and that's a huge factor, that you can always increase your well-being, but you can also go downhill quite quickly if you don't do anything about it. So we created the Business Health Institute, and as well as a real human approach from our own personal insights, what we wanted to do was give people data, so that you can separate that soup I talked about earlier, and understand what's going on with yourself, what's going on, you know, where's my stress coming from personally, you know, what's giving me the biggest stress factor personally. Is it work? Is it finances? Is it family? What is it? So that I can start to unpick things and deal with things that are really top priority. We also look at, you know, we use the organizational human factor benchmark, which is a psychological assessment. So we're looking at what your workplace experience looks like for yourself. You know, you might be in a role with high demands, and if you are, you need resources. Now, I reflect back to my time when I was burning out. If I'd have had access to that tool, and I could have identified exactly, I could have gone to my boss and go, look, I've learned this about myself. This is what I need to thrive in my role. Let's make these small changes so that I can re-engaged and get my energy back and then be motivated to achieve the organisational goals, because I'd a lot of experience, a lot of energy, until I didn't have the resources I needed to fulfil that role successfully anymore. And
Yeah.
that's a shame when you look at your talent and experience that you bring into, I'm not just talking about me, I'm talking about people out there, that, you know, when you think you've built up to a certain experience and time in a role, you really want to understand the factors that help you thrive in that role. And then we talk about strategic self-leadership. You know, you use the Firstbeat. Like I said, you're mirroring back that data at you. You're making small changes in your own life that help maximize your own personal performance. Give yourself a personal and a professional edge through understanding the whole factors that contribute to your well-being. You know, we talk about well-being, but we talk about well-being generally, but unless you really understand those complete factors that are contributing to your well-being, it's hard to identify what you do well. So that's what we bring together, and then it's that coaching to support. So as I said earlier, when capacity catches up with demands, if you're in a high demanding role, your resources need to be higher. They need to match or at least be higher than your demands. But you need to know what resources you need to complete those roles. So that's, you know, that's something that leadership find really useful when it's identified, because they're often, as I said, you know, in the Firstbeat or in this data, you're not talking about massive changes, you're talking about small tweaks, but you've got the data, and that makes a massive difference.
Yeah, and by the way, while Julie is talking, we are putting a brilliant guide that Julie and Jackie have put together, a burnout guide in a way. So we're putting that in the chat, so you can access it via chat. And if you for some reason can't access it from there, you can also, we'll have Julie's email in the last slide, and you'll be able to get it from her as well. But it's a really great guide, sort of personal, but also organizational guide.
So this is your performance resilience. You know, I say to people, don't wait until you're unwell. Look at what you're doing well now, and look at what you need to really keep that personal and professional edge. Look at what you need to thrive in your role and beyond that. So when you build up resilience, when factors hit, you know, when factors hit, stress hits, personal or external factors, if you've got high, you know, one particular day where you've got a lot of decisions to make, when your resilience is good, you're able to deal with those a lot better than if you're tired, if
Yeah.
you're weary. So you're building up, it's like building up a battery bank, isn't it? When you connect that with your iPhone, you don't leave your phone to get really depleted in battery. And it's the same with ourselves. You know, you're building up, you're keeping yourself plugged in, you're keeping yourself charged with energy, so that your resilience is at a much higher level. And that helps you lead with intention. You know, you're not impacted as much, and you're not being reactive, because you've got the energy to be more intentional about where you place your energy, what your decision making needs to be, what your priorities are. We talk about managing energy and not your time so much, because if you can manage your energy, you can cognitively manage your time much more effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. Those who have listened to me know that I often talk about the load of life, and that's very much of what Julie was talking about with slightly different terminology. But all those factors that cause some kind of stress, whether it's positive or negative, our exercise and all those things, they constitute our load of life, and particularly when that load gets heavier for whatever reason. So when suddenly the demands are higher, that's when our tendency is to, for example, start sleeping less. And that's exactly when we need to build up those resources like that previous slide showed. So that's a really good good way to think about it, that they have to be in balance with each other. Great. Thank you so much, Julie, for sharing your experience. And I can see that we have a lot of questions and we have about 5 minutes time. So let me go and see what is there. A couple of people have raised their hands. Unfortunately, I'm not able to turn the audio on here. So if you have questions, please write them in the chat, and we'll try to pick them up from there. If we miss a question, we'll check them out afterwards, and we'll answer to you via email afterwards. So no worries. There's a question about, is the heart rate variability measurement always a measure over longer time, or can you gain meaningful measure from short periods? I'd say that for this type of analysis and measurement, the meaningful period is at least a day and a night, because without understanding what that person's sort of resting baseline is, what your heart rate variability does when you're sleeping and resting, it's very difficult to put that in perspective. Of course, a window of time, it tells something, but it's harder to put it into wider context. So in that way, particularly for these types of interventions and measurements, I would always recommend having those kind of multi-day measurements that really truly shows the person's baseline, and then we can gain better understanding from that. People are suggesting research projects where you get an intervention that can raise HRV. So of course, in a research intervention, you could do that. If you have a specific situation where you're measuring HRV during that specific session, and then you do an intervention and you measure again, you could see change. So yeah, for that kind of, if you just want to demonstrate a phenomena, I agree, then it's possible. But for these kind of lifestyle insights, I would say longer measurements.
Tiina, there's someone asking about they're using a Garmin wrist fitness tracker, which I think is a really interesting question, because it's one that we come across many times, that people are measuring their activity through wristwatch rather than the Firstbeat. And people often ask me what the difference is. So I think it's the person asking the question saying they had to take 3 months off work due to high cortisol resulting from stress, but they're not sure that they can make meaningful improvements to their data, and they're asking if the Firstbeat system improves their data when they're asleep. And I can contribute to that, but I know you're a much better place to answer that one.
Yeah, it is so that Garmin or any of the other sort of optical devices, they are estimating your HRV, and you're estimating your pulse from your wrist or from your finger, and the accuracy is not going to be as good as with this kind of a device that electrically actually measures that heartbeat. I would say that those kind of devices, on average nowadays, on most people, they work quite well and they provide a lot of good insights. And if you consistently use that, you can learn a lot about your own trends. But I would be a little bit leery of sort of concluding that your situation is really bad just because your wearable device was telling you that, because it could be inaccurate. It might not be correctly interpreted. So, of course, it has to be a combination of how you are feeling and what kind of data the device tells. But if your wearable is giving you terrible scores, I definitely can't promise that Firstbeat would give you better scores, because we don't usually see a difference like that in a specific direction.
But it does give you more of an overview, doesn't it, the Firstbeat, Tiina? I think I like the interconnectivity of the Firstbeat, that you've got that snapshot that gives you that interconnectivity of how your HRV is impacted throughout the day and evening. And I think it's easier to see what changes you need to make or would like to make to improve. That's what I found. I found that it's given me a much deeper insight into making those changes that impact each other.
Yeah, and certainly if there are individuals online who would be keen to understand that more, so I encourage you to contact Julie directly, because she's actually able to provide that assessment. Or if you're from some other country, you can look on our website, and we have a lot of providers in different countries who can provide this kind of a service for you as an individual. So it is very different level of insights you can gain from that, together with the coach who can help you interpret in a meaningful way. A couple of people are commenting that they cannot see the chat. It's actually in the Q&A box. So I do have a lot of questions, so it seems to be available. But if somebody doesn't see that, we'll make sure. I can't see right now if the PDF has been posted here in the Q&A yet. I can't do it right now. So if it's not here, we'll make sure you can get it via the email. So we'll get it to you afterwards. It's a really nice guide. And I can't see it here in the Q&A right now, so perhaps we've somehow missed posting it in here. Let me see, I'll see if I can see one or two quick questions here. Yeah, I think there's a couple of questions about the Firstbeat graph, but I think we covered that, the different colors, what that meant, and that. Yeah, it's absolutely can be a little bit confusing if you don't know what that means, but kind of the main thing to understand about the Firstbeat graphs is the red color that you typically see there. It is called stress, but it is activation, it's energy, it's positive and negative. So nobody needs to get worried if they see red in their charts, as long as it's not dominating all day and all night. Great questions. Thank you so much for everybody who's been posting them. Kaisa has posted here that we are going to post the burnout material in a recording email tomorrow, so no worries about that one. Maybe I'll just take a quick question on the heart rate variability baseline. So in general, like if you have a wearable device that is measuring your heart rate variability, I would always encourage you to measure for quite a while before you really know what your baseline is. Measure it during sleep. So make sure that you have your ring or your wrist device during sleep. The first night or the first 2 nights, the device doesn't really yet know what your pattern is, but then as it gets more data, then it starts to understand some wearables might calculate like a 7-day sleep average, others might have a slightly different algorithm, but in any case, as you accumulate more data, then your device understands what's your normal level, and then you can start comparing that to when you suddenly start seeing differences, for example, or if you start noticing that your normal trend baseline is starting to dip significantly, even if you're doing the same things, then that's some kind of cause for concern and trying to understand why it might be doing that. But I think we'll end today's session here. We are a couple of minutes over time already, but we had actually a much larger group online than I expected, since it's July and many people had said that they were just having to wait for the recording. But thanks so much everyone joining. Julie, huge warm thanks to you for sharing your story and so honestly telling about what it was like and what you've learned from that. And let's stay in touch. If you want to learn more about the Firstbeat method as a professional tool, reach out to us here at Firstbeat. And if you want to know more about the Business Health Institute model or are interested maybe on a project with them, Julie's a great contact person for that. So tomorrow you'll get some more information from us, and thank you everyone. Now we are taking a short summer break and we'll be back in late August or September with some more content from the Firstbeat. And so enjoy the summertime, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.